Welcome to the Lend Academy podcast, episode number 136. This is your host, Peter Renton, founder of Lend Academy and co-founder of Lend It. Support for the Lend Academy podcast and the following message comes from Wonder Capital, the easiest way to invest in large-scale solar energy projects across the US. With Wonder, you can help finance renewable energy projects while earning up to 7.5% annually. To get started, visit wondercapital.com/lendacademy. Wonder Capital, where impact investing meets capitalism. Today on the show, I'm delighted to have Don Davis. He is the co-founder and managing partner at Prime Meridian. Now, Prime Meridian are an investment management firm focused on the marketplace lending space. They've been around for many years. And in fact, I had Don on the podcast back in 2014. It's been almost 4 years since then. So I wanted to get him back on the show to talk about how he's been able to grow his company, how he's been able to diversify his offerings, and what his thoughts are on the space today. The marketplace lending space has changed a lot. We talk about that. We talk about the due diligence he does on new platforms. We talk about the pullback in 2016 and how he was able to survive and thrive during that time. And we talk about what the future holds. It was a fascinating interview. Hope you enjoy the show. Welcome back to the podcast, Don.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Okay, so, and I went back and looked, it's been almost 4 years. It was April of 2014 when we last had you on. But so a lot of people probably don't know a lot about you. So maybe you could just start off by giving us a little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I've been involved in finance in one form or another for the past 20 plus years. More recently, in 2004, I founded Novus Investments, which was an alternative investment management firm. And we were registered as a CPA as well as an introducing broker since we allocated to other managers as well. In 2008, the one strategy that I managed and traded produced a positive double-digit return for our investors. And by 2012, I'd been ranked the number one CPA in the U.S.
Nice.
For total performance. Thank you. Over 3 times over a 5 and 7 year period. Everything was going great. I mean, we were doing well, killing it, except for the fact that we had 2 clearing firms we worked with that suddenly went bankrupt, which, as you can imagine, makes things a bit difficult.
Right.
But in hindsight, the timing was good, as I already had a watchful eye on the burgeoning P2P marketplace lending space, and the pivot has worked out quite well, and here I am today.
All right. So then when exactly did you start PMI, and tell us about how marketplace lending got on your radar?
Yeah, so I had been watching it closely with great interest prior to the launch, and also while I was running Novus, my partner Val Kotieff was very active in P2P lending, being one of the very first lending investors at Prosper in March of 2006.
Wow, that is early.
And he built I think he was, it was 2 weeks after they opened up for business. He saw an article in the New York Times. Right. It was either New York Times or Wall Street Journal, and he opened up an account immediately. But he built up a sizable portfolio. It held up incredibly well during the Great Recession. And then a few years later, after he had another successful exit from one of his businesses, he was looking to get involved in the space, in a more meaningful way. So we eventually hooked up and became partners. Prime Meridian was started in April 2012. Val started off as an early investor in our first fund, and then he later bought in as a more material partner and active member. And as far as why the firm was started, it was started because I'm a believer in the industry, first and foremost. And I sensed that there was great potential to build a scalable business over time and also to provide an attractive alternative for our investors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. That's I've been a big believer from day one as well. Yep. So back when we had you on 4 years ago, I think you just had the one fund, and now it seems like you've expanded your offerings. Tell us a little bit about the expansion of your company over the last 4 years.
Yeah, so by intention, we have built up a family of 4 different strategies, and that was by design. I think that great businesses of all industries are led by great people managing great products, and you got to have the right process, of course, as well. And so it wasn't just about having a single fund for us from day one. This was really a vision that we had early on, is let's build up let's show that we can demonstrate that we can produce something successful and that works, and then let's build off of that success and build up different product lines for different investor needs. And so our funds are limited to accredited and qualified investors, so we can't naturally go into too much detail. But we do cover all the major verticals, including consumer, small business, and real estate. One of our funds is leveraged by intention for investors that are very comfortable with the space and they want a leveraged return. And then the other funds are intentionally unlevered, so zero leverage, just a sort of a clean, transparent, diversified fund in each of the major verticals.
Okay. So then, what can you share? Like the scale you guys are at. Like, what is your total assets under management today?
Yeah, our total AUM is approximately $650 million today, and that's all in marketplace loans in the industry. Our minimum investment's $500K. Again, it's accredited and qualified investors, and that AUM has grown quite a bit since the last time we had the podcast.
Yes, it has indeed. So then, can we just give a sense of the type of investors that you're working, that are coming into your fund, and how that's changed over the last 4 years? Are you still? Is it high net worth individuals? I mean, who are the people coming into your fund?
Sure. So as our AUM continues to grow, naturally, so does our average size of our investor. Hence, in the early days, it was the individual high net worth investors and some smaller registered investment advisors. These days, it's the family offices, the fund of funds, and institutions that we're mostly talking to. So we have large asset managers around the world, single multifamily offices, fund of funds, institutions, you name it.
So I'm curious about how your conversations with these investors have changed. Like, here we are, early 2018. The industry has been around for over a decade, and a lot of people know about the major players in the space. So how would you say, when you're talking with the potential investors, how has the conversation changed from today from what it was like 2 or 3 years ago?
Well, first off, investors have gotten much more educated and sophisticated on the space, which I appreciate. It often makes conversations easier because those are the conversations I like to have. Sometimes, though, it does make things more inefficient and difficult because a lot of investors out there are getting fed bad information and false narratives. And one example of that is that the underwriting has gotten worse in 2017 at major consumer platforms, which simply isn't true. And the data point that some of these investors are being fed by some people out there is they'll show the index, let's say, of like a Prosper or Lending Club in 2015 and 16. The index, which has the index return and the index default rate and the loss curves, and then they show that index for Prosper and Lending Club for 2017. And what you see delinquencies and the default rate is a little bit higher on the loss curve in 2017. But here's the part that they're missing, is that the components of the index has changed.
Right.
So if you remember, I think in 2015, 16, like Prosper, for example, 40% of the index was A's and double A's. It was super prime borrowers made up 40% of the passive index. And that's because some of their big investors wanted that. And then now it's a little bit more evenly distributed with less double A's and A's. So now the index is a little bit more diversified. So you have a higher WAC, higher weighted average coupon, and you have a little bit higher delinquency and default, but the net return is also higher. And so that's how I think investors can take a statistic and be misled into a false narrative if they're not getting the whole story. Right.
No, we've certainly seen that, and I know that we've had. I write about my own personal returns every quarter, and they're not where they were a couple of years ago. Although we starting to see some of the earlier, or some of the later 2017 vintages are actually seem to be doing better. And I think part of it is that they've increased like in 2015, and we all remember it was just a crazy time back then when there was just so much investor money sloshing around the industry that they felt like they could, as you said, like Prosper sort of they had all this demand for this low interest paper, and so you had interest rates came down. I mean, like particularly when it came to you've been around for a long time, 2012, 2013. I mean, you could get double digit returns, I wouldn't say easily, but they were certainly available. But over the last, that was, I think back then we're not going to go back to that anytime soon because they've reduced their rates and then they've increased them, again now it's probably back to a more fair level. Would you say?
I mean, it depends on how you define fair, but yes, I would agree in large part with everything you just said. Correct.
Right. Okay. So then, can you share the names of platforms that you're investing on today?
Sure.
You've mentioned the three different verticals, but can you share some names?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah. So on the consumer side, we work with the three majors. Lending Club, Prosper, and we do a little bit with SoFi on their consumer loans, not on student loans. And so those are the three biggest consumer originators in the U.S. And a small business, some of the names we work with are Biz2 Credit, Lending Club, small business. We do a funding circle. So those are some of the firms we work with there. On real estate, it's Share State, Patch of Land, Lending Home, Money 360 are some of the names we're working with there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And we're always on the lookout for other platforms as well. From day one, we never wanted to be a guinea pig for anybody's platform. We don't like the really small ones. We don't like some of these small balance sheet lenders out there, especially, which I think are bringing different types of risk. You have a much higher tail risk when you're working with some of those types of lenders. And so we prefer really strong, marketplace lenders with strong balance sheets, really strong management, and that also have strong growth.
Mm-hmm. So then, just on that, that's an interesting point. That how would you? Obviously, you've brought on new platforms over time. You talked about some of the larger names, but they weren't all around, a long time ago. So I'm curious about the process that you go through. You gave a little bit of a hint there, but can we go in a little bit more depth about what you do to due diligence a new platform?
Yeah. So, again, just, segueing off of what I said, it's really just, getting to know the management inside out. We want to know the management's background. They need to have underwriters, a strong underwriting experience. They need to have a background in what they're doing today. You had a lot of smart people enter the industry on the originator side and on the fund management side over the years.
Mm-hmm.
I can testify a lot of very smart people. I'll definitely testify to that. But they all had varying backgrounds. Some were just someone that worked in a tech industry, or some worked in this industry. So they had one area of success in their life, but they didn't have a lot of experience at maybe being a fund manager or being an originator or being an underwriter. And so I talked about that, I think, early on at some of the lender conferences and so forth, on panels, that I had some concerns about, some of the people entering the space that, if they don't have a lot of the right experience or the right team, that at some point I think that's going to lead to some issues and problems. So one of the things is that, who's doing the underwriting and what's their background, right? It's like, what have you been doing the last 10, 20 years? It seems so elementary, but again, you'd be surprised at some of the answers to those questions with some of these originators. So we want to know the background. There has to be a lot of depth and expertise there. They have to be solid. They have to have a really strong balance sheet. I don't want to do business with anyone that I think might be going under in the next 6 months. They have to have institutional internal controls, or at least be halfway there with very strong internal controls. Who's their auditor? They have to be willing to work with our auditor for look-through testing. I mean, in the early days, that was a little more difficult than it is today. And with some of the smaller guys, that sometimes can be cumbersome. So they have to be willing to do that, and they have to pass our look-through testing. And so there's really just there's a checklist that we have, just like, investors will have a checklist on doing due diligence on us. We have that with these platforms, and they really have to check all of the boxes. And at the same time, I do want to add that, we can't be too picky or perfect with our due diligence requirements, because if we were that way in 2012, right, we wouldn't even have launched.
Right.
I mean, the real big issue in 2011 and 2012 for me was really on platform risk and on, do you have bankruptcy remote segregation of assets with a backup servicer?
Mm-hmm.
because I had very real experience with two clearing firms going under. And so I was pretty nervous about that type of tail risk. And I remember one of the first questions I asked, former CEO Renaud Planche at Lending Club, is what happens to our clients' assets when you guys go under? This was in 2011. And he says, well, we don't plan on going under. And of course I said, well, neither did Lehman and neither did Bear Stearns.
Right.
And neither does MF Global, and nobody plans on going under. So I said, well, when you have the answer to that question, I think we'll start doing business. And it was in 2012, actually, Prosper was the first.
I remember that. Yep.
To launch bankruptcy remote segregation, and they rolled in all the existing notes into that. And that's when we felt comfortable. That's why we started off with Prosper only in the beginning for that reason.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was back in the day when also Prosper you could tell who was investing on the platform, and not names, but everyone had a screen name, and you could see, who was the large investors and what they were investing in. It was a fascinating time.
Yeah.
But
we used to do some reverse engineering to see how we were performing compared to the competition.
Right. Yeah. There was only about 3 or 4 institutional investors back in those days. So it was, and then they removed the screen names and all the transparency, which is probably fair enough. But it was it used to be fun looking at all of the different loans that strategies that people were adopting. It was fascinating. But anyway, we digress.
Right.
So I want to talk about, there's been some consolidation. I think I remember hearing you talk about it on one of the lender panels a couple of years ago, that, I'm sure you've due diligence some of these platforms that have gone out of business. And I'm just curious about it's not surprising. We all knew that there was too much money going into some of these ideas that probably should never have been funded in the first place. But then what would you say are some of the common themes that led to some of these platforms' demise? Is there something that we can all learn here from, you talk about your due diligence process, that you said no to a platform? What are some of the things that maybe people can sort of glean from your knowledge about why companies go out of business?
Yeah, So first off, I'll start off by saying, and I think you were at the conference with me just a few months ago, Peter. I remember seeing you, but I was in a panel. We talked about this, and I think it's a good intro. First Associates had said publicly that over the past 12 months they have taken over backup servicing on 9 different originators. Mm-hmm. Now, of those 9 originators, just over the past 12 months, 9 originators have failed that they had to take over servicing for. Of those 9, one of them was a small marketplace lender, and the other 8 were balance sheet lenders.
Right.
And so so first and foremost, that was a kind of a thesis that I think that I had right, a few years ago as I was talking about that. There were a lot of intelligent people that were disagreeing, saying, no, the balance sheet lenders that have skin in the game, they're better underwriters, they're better to do business with. The marketplace lender. The problem is, so first and foremost, what causes a lot of companies to go out of business is leverage. Excessive leverage. Mm-hmm. And therein lies the problem with a lot of these balance sheet lenders, is that they're using excessive leverage.
Right.
So there's balance sheet lenders out there that are using 100% leverage. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have none of their own skin in the game, and it's all borrowed skin that they're paying very high interest rates on to just leverage the book. And the ones that do have skin, it's a very small piece, usually maybe 5% at most that I've seen. So excessive leverage, that's what caused MF Global to go under. That's what caused Lehman to go under. That's what caused Bear Stearns to go under. That's what caused long-term capital management to go under back in 1998. And so I think that is the biggest issue right there. And then with the others, with the one marketplace lender, I just think with marketplace lending, the challenge is, so the benefit to balance sheet lending is that you can, whatever's going to happen, I think it's going to happen quickly, right? So it's easier to make a profit because you're taking all of the return. Right. And you're leveraging the return. So if you're very disciplined at money management, and you're very disciplined at living beneath your means and managing your expenses, and you grow, you can make good profits in short order. With marketplace, but you're at a higher risk. With marketplace lending, it takes much longer and much more resources to scale, right? So you're losing money for long periods of time because your margins are thinner. And so, but I think it's easier to survive. And as you can see, in 2016, we had the headaches with Lending Club and Prosper and so forth. They both, in fact, if you think about it, the 3 largest originators in consumer all three have had their CEOs ousted in the last 18 months.
Right. That's
right.
Very true.
But all three of them, in my opinion, are going to be around for many years.
Mm-hmm.
And so that just goes to show you they survived. But if you have a balance sheet lender that maybe has the CEO ousted, like there was a very large balance sheet lender that did, that usually they're in trouble. So on the marketplace lending side, is if you're too small and you're just not growing fast enough, then that's where I think you're going to get pressure. And the one that went under, I think that's exactly what happened. And part of our due diligence we did on them, and just really in the months before they went under, before it was known they were going to go under, everything was looking okay, but it was more of a qualitative type of due diligence where I sensed there was some desperation there.
Mm-hmm.
And when people get desperate, it's that the end is near.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about you just mentioned sort of the pullback in 2016, even before the Renault Laplanche exit from Lending Club. There was definitely some pullback on the investor side. How was that for you guys? Did you get? I imagine you had some nervous investors after the Renault Laplanche episode, but. So how was that time period for you?
So customer service certainly spiked up.
Right.
Our hours of customer service went up significantly after that. There had to be lots of discussions, emails, investor letters, and individual emails, and individual phone calls, and conference calls. So that goes up during times like that. And really the biggest concern was, are they going out of business? And how is that going to affect my investment with you? And is it going to have any impact on the loans? And how are things, performing? And what's the next 3 months, 6 months look like? Those I think were some of the common, and naturally, rightfully so. And so we, although the customer service went up, we really didn't get many redemptions at all. On a percentage basis, I think it was very, very little, the low single digits in redemptions. And even better than that was we had a lot of new deposits coming in. And I think part of what has helped us too is there's been some consolidation, in the industry, and there was some other funds out there that struggled, and some of them went out of business. And so because of that, I think when you have fewer funds remaining, then I think there's fewer places for investors to allocate. And so that I think actually helped us pick up our AUM growth after that happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure. So I want to get your take on just your view of the marketplace lending space today. I mean, we've certainly we've come a long way, but it hasn't been a smooth ride. And we had the go-go days of 2015, and then the pullback in 2016, and in 2017 was a more sort of focus on profitability and getting your house in order. So where are we today, and give us your sort of take on where the industry is today?
Yeah, I think I'm optimistic on the industry. I have been since day one. I was mildly optimistic in 2011, 2012. By 2014 and 15, when everybody was giddy, I was mildly optimistic. I was probably one of the least optimistic people in 2014 and 15. And then after 2016, when people started getting less optimistic, I'm still really the same. But it's for different reasons. And first and foremost, I'm not married to any industry. I'm not married to any asset class or any strategy. It's really, if a strategy is totally not working, or the industry's falling apart, or doesn't look good, then it's time to pivot and do something different for our investors, or change the strategy. So, we don't see that. Just because returns have drifted, just because you've had some vintages in late 15 and 16 that underperformed the vintages before that and after that, that doesn't make the asset class bad. Just because you've had some issues with, one company or another, that doesn't make the industry or the asset class bad. So overall, when we look at this industry and we compare it to, on a relative basis, it's still very attractive. We still think it gives a very attractive alternative to other fixed income investments out there. So we really like the industry a lot. That being said, over time, great fund managers do need to evolve. You do need to always be on the lookout for, where is the industry evolving. and what's the next niche and what's the next vertical. And so we're definitely we have lots of those talks and discussions internally about how we can always be one step ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm. So then on that, like what areas do you like most and what do you like least, shall we say?
So over the past, and this is, one of our, our newer funds that covers the real estate vertical, so that's an area that we've had some interest in, for a few years,
mm-hmm.
and we watched it very closely for about a year before launching. That vertical, I like a lot. I think it's very interesting. It's a little bit different than some of the other verticals and how it operates. And the type of borrowers and the type of loans, et cetera. So that's one I like a lot. Even then, though, what we're seeing in this current market is that as LIBOR is on the rise and Fed funds are on the rise, we see consumer rates going up. But in some of the other verticals, like small business and real estate, we don't see that happening. We see yields either holding tight or even drifting down because of investor demand. And so even though I like that space a lot, we keep a watchful eye. We have lots of discussions with the originators on that, because I think one thing that a lot of originators miss that is most important for long-term success, in my opinion, is that it's all about borrower experience and investor return.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that most originators, even the big names, forget that. Borrower experience and investor return, because the vast majority of borrowers, they want the best experience, the best service. They want the fastest turnaround. And if the interest rate's a point or two higher or lower, I don't think it's a showstopper for the vast majority of borrowers.
Right.
But for investors, it's about investor return.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can have the right return for the investors and have outstanding borrower experience, that's going to be, I think, a long-term success story for the originators that are focused on that. And I think sometimes originators, they just look only at how can we facilitate more volume in the easiest, fastest way, which usually means lowering returns.
Right.
And so one of my concerns is that we don't want to see any of the real estate originators make the same mistakes that the consumer originators did.
Yes.
A couple of years ago. So that's just I like the most, but have some concerns on that topic. Least, I would say student loans I probably like the least. Maybe some of the auto paper.
Mm-hmm.
Some parts of auto is interesting to me, and some parts I don't like a lot. Like if you're buying a brand new car as a prime borrower, I don't think that's very interesting at all. And student loans that we've never had an interest in.
Right. And that's just because of the yields, I presume.
Yeah, well, it's yield, and also it's tail risk. And again, it's tail risk is what I think a lot of investors overlook. And so you may have many years of low defaults and low delinquencies, and it looks wonderful on paper, but tail risk is very difficult to quantify based on looking at statistics. And I think there's a lot of tail risk in student loans because student loans, there are people out there, very smart people out there, very, very successful investors that have said publicly that student loans are in a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And have been, and it's a disaster waiting to happen. And so it's very heavily politicized. It's, politicians talk about all the time about giving students a break and extending their payments and giving them holidays and doing whatever it takes to never let them default. And so as an investor, I just think that's big tail risk. It's kind of sloppiness. It's a different type of treatment than most other forms of credit, and it's low returns to boot.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So not my type of product.
Understood. So we're almost out of time, but a couple more questions I want to ask. I noticed you were on the Inc. 5000 list of the fastest growing private companies in America, last year, and obviously you've grown tremendously since our last conversation. So what are the things that you can point to that have helped you grow your business the way you have?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I want to point out we also made the Bay Area, San Francisco as well. We were number 14 on the top 100 San Francisco list, which was very humbling and exciting as well.
Congratulations.
Some big names like thank you, like Salesforce, and other big names here in the Bay Area have graced the pages of that list before. Mm-hmm. And then again, we were on the Inc. 5000, as you mentioned, and this is of all industries, all companies, all industries, in the country and in the Bay Area. And so as far as what I can point to, it's having the right team first and foremost. Having the right team. We have great people that all work very hard, and we all have to share the same goals. And we have great products in this space. We're very dedicated and focused to the space. We do a great job of portfolio management and risk management. I think so. We've done a good job for our investors, and we work hard just getting the message out there. And from day one, early on. And you've been the same way, and I think I've learned from some of the others in the industry as well, but it's about education for us. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm out there, speaking at a conference or out there, participating at Lendit, for example, I'm not thinking, okay, how many lead cards did I get and who's signing up for the fund today? I'm thinking about, I love what I do. I'm having fun. It's education. It's information. And it's putting ourselves out there. And so I think by doing that regularly, year in and year out, we've gained a lot of exposure, and that exposure has helped us grow pretty significantly as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so final question then. I mean, what's next for you guys? What's your vision for Prime Meridian going forward?
Yeah, so we do have something. We have a couple of exciting things in the works for 2018, and don't want to give exactly what it is at this time, but mm-hmm. I would say keep your eyes out for another potential fund launch later this year, which is going to be something very unique and very different than what we're doing right now, and totally uncorrelated, but yet still in the credit space. And so I think that's going to be very, very exciting. And again, it's just a way to evolve as a company and as a firm, and continue to build upon our great brand and add additional product lines for our investors. And, expect continued growth. We're also investing significantly in machine learning technology to continue to have next generation analytics and predictive modeling on all of our funds and all of our verticals. And so we have some interesting things going on right there. We're always looking to stay one step ahead of the game and how we can, have an edge. And as a reminder, we are active managers. We don't just buy passively and randomly from whatever the originators decide to originate. And so between those two things, I think it's going to be an exciting year, and we expect continued growth. We're based on our pipeline and our projections. We're expecting to hit, $1 billion AUM, by Q3, Q4 this year, which will be very exciting.
Okay, it will be exciting. I'm very curious to find out some of those things. But anyway, it's always great to chat with you, Don. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Great chatting with you.
Okay,
see you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. I just want to go back to that point that Don made earlier about the two most important things, borrower experience and investor returns. And I really feel like that we have created this industry that it's incredibly complex, and there's so much going on. And when it all boils down to it, it's a two-sided equation. You've got the borrowers and you've got the investors. And, if borrower experience is not great, and that includes, interest rates and how you kind of interact with the borrower during the application process. If that isn't great, you're not going to be able to thrive. And at the same time, if investor returns go down, then you're not going to be able to attract new capital. And it's really as simple as that. The companies that are continuing to thrive are those that do well on both sides of the equation. Anyway, on that note, I will sign off. I very much appreciate you listening, and I'll catch you next time. Bye. This episode of the Lend Academy podcast was supported by Wonder Capital, the easiest way to invest in large-scale solar energy projects across the US. Experts at Bloomberg estimate that $2.8 trillion will be invested in solar energy by 2040. With Wonder Capital's solar investment platform, individuals can now take advantage of this economic opportunity. Visit wondercapital.com/lendacademy to find out how you can begin investing in solar energy projects while earning up to 7.5% annually, and also helping in the fight against climate change.